Good evening and welcome everybody. Here Greg Estabrooks at the Capitol Center with tonight's all candidates debate for 2021. The federal election is just 6 days away. We're also partnering with the North Bay and District Chamber of Commerce. 3 of the 4 candidates are here. We'll hear from the other candidate via tape message a little bit later on. So without any further ado, let's get started. First, after a draw was made to pick the order of speakers, Scott Robertson has lived in downtown North Bay for 11 years with his spouse Lindsay and son Miles. He is an educator, an infantry reservist, arborist, library worker, and since 2018 a North Bay City Councillor. He has lived across Canada from Halifax to Whitehorse, all over Northern Ontario, from Sault Ste. Marie to Nipissing-Timiskaming. He is a committed person to social, environmental, and economic justice. He is a backcountry camping enthusiast and is fluently bilingual, and he has 1 minute for his opening statement.
Thanks a lot, Greg, and thanks to your TV for hosting this debate tonight. Over the last 4 weeks, I've been traveling across this district. I've had literally thousands of interactions with voters from Nulisker to Thorne to Mattawa to Powassan and everywhere in between. And you've been very clear with me about your priorities. J'ai même eu la chance de pratiquer mon français avec plusieurs d'entre vous et vous aviez été très clair de vos priorités. You've told me that more and more people can't afford housing, can't afford prescription medication, can't afford childcare. You've told me that you want bold action on climate change, on truth and reconciliation, on the opioid crisis. Those are your priorities. Those are my priorities. Those are the priorities of the NDP. Of all the parties are promising deficit spending, but we're the only party that has a bold plan to address those issues while having the lowest deficits of all 3. And we're going to do that by making sure the ultra-rich and the most profitable corporations are the ones who are paying for this recovery. And I look forward to discussing that with you over the next couple of hours.
All right, Scott, thank you very much. Moving on to the middle podium, a very familiar face to folks in the riding. A veteran MP, Anthony Rota, was elected to a 5th term by the people of Nipissing-Timiskaming in the 2019 federal election. Shortly after that, he was selected by his colleagues as the Speaker of the House of Commons, a first for an Italian Canadian and for this riding. His number 1 priority, he says, is to advocate for the people of Nipissing-Timiskaming and to make the riding even stronger. He is grateful to his wife Chantel and daughter Samantha, who make all of this, or all things, possible. Anthony, a minute.
I want to thank the people of Nipissing-Timiskaming for working hard, along with the Government of Canada, in mitigating the impact of COVID-19. Over the last number of years, as your MP, I have worked tirelessly with municipalities and local economic development departments to bring new funding, new businesses, and keep existing businesses growing in the riding. I also made sure that we benefited from social programs in the riding, as well as infrastructure investments. And as we come out of COVID-19, this pandemic has taken a lot. I want to see that support continues to grow so that we can all prosper together. I look forward to your questions this evening. Thank you. Merci, miigwech.
Thank you very much, Anthony. That moves us to podium number 3 and the Conservative candidate for the riding. Born and raised in East Ferris, Stephen currently lives in Astorville with his wife, Crystal, and proudly serves as deputy mayor. Mr. Trahan has also served for 19 years as a volunteer firefighter, committed to making a difference in the community. Stephen has been a uniformed police officer in North Bay for 21 years. He's also a small business owner. Stephen Trahan says he will work with community leaders and all residents to give Nipissing-Timiskaming honest, dedicated, and determined representation in Ottawa. Stephen, you have 1 minute.
Thanks a lot, Greg. I believe deeply in the public service and giving back to our community to make a difference. As you said, Greg, I've been a 21-year police officer, and the last 14 years I've attended the needs with my co-workers as being their voice on the Health and Safety Committee, making changes to the greater good. I'm currently positioned as the Deputy Mayor of East Ferris and also own and operate a small business. I'm proud to stand with Aaron O'Toole, Conservative government, to work secure for the future in this great district. I ensure that no one gets left behind. I'm dedicated to serve to our district. Thank you.
Okay, that will bring us to the first part of the debate in regards to questions being asked, questions being answered, and then that will open it up to debate to make this a real debate. Question 1 comes from Patty Carr, formerly of the Chamber, now works for NICO, the Community Futures Development Corporation. Question 1. While some businesses fared well through the pandemic, many small business and medium-sized businesses needed to rely on federal grants, loans, relief programs to get them through the lockdowns and various business closures. How does your party see moving forward to assist businesses in the current recovery phase and getting back to somewhat normal in the future? Again, that's from Patty Carr. And Scott gets to go first.
Sure, thanks for the question, Patty. If you are a small business in this district that has benefited from the wage subsidy, the 75% wage subsidy, you can thank the NDP for that. The Liberal Party originally wanted a 10% wage subsidy, and the NDP pushed them to raise that up to 75% so that you could continue to pay your employees during the pandemic. And the NDP wants to continue the wage subsidy and the rent subsidies until such time as all the pandemic restrictions have been lifted. We also want to help businesses in what is probably the biggest concern that I've heard from small businesses, which is the ability to hire people. And the NDP government and the NDP MPs are going to push for long-term deals with small businesses in order to pay the employer portions of the CPP and the EI so that you can incentivize workers with higher wages. We also want to cap credit card merchants fees at 1%, which will give businesses more money to put back into their businesses, put back into their staff, and however they see fit with their businesses. The NDP has the back of small businesses, and we prioritize the mom and pop shops in this district over the big corporations that are the most profitable in the world.
All right, we're going to open it up now to any debate in regards to this specific question about how small business and medium-sized business has been devastated during the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdowns. Gentlemen, Anthony.
No, the way I see it is it's been a rough 18 months, and there has been a lot of support for independent businesses, small and large. And it was our government who put the legislation forward. Yes, we're very thankful that the NDP supported our ideas and our plans, and we worked together. And I think it worked out well. When we look at the U.S., they're at 72% employment of where they were when the pandemic started. We're already at 90. So what we're looking at is we're seeing a good recovery. Is it right across the board? Not quite yet, but there is still a lot of help going to the individual businesses. One of the areas that we want to help with, and especially in this area, is helping in the small business tourism area, where we're helping them with rent and costs so that they can make it through the winter, so that come the spring, the whole plan has been keeping businesses going so that when the economy takes off again, what'll end up happening is they'll hit the road running.
But wouldn't that create an enormous debt? We've already talked about this many times in our interview segments. I mean, there's an enormous debt load here that will take, we're going to get to that later, but I just want to know how you can afford to pay for all that.
No, you know, you talk about a debt, and as long as it's reasonable and it's a reasonable percentage of the GDP, it's manageable. And I'm not saying we're going to go into deep debt. We have taken on quite a bit, but just the question I have for the people back home is, imagine what would have happened if we didn't have those supports. The economy would have fallen apart. People would be starving. They wouldn't be able to pay their bills. They would be out in the streets. By supporting them with these programs, we ended up allowing them to stay in business and holding on so that, again, the economy's starting to take off, they will hit the road running, and that's what the important thing is.
I want to give Stephen a chance to jump in. Stephen, do you think that the Liberal government handled it the way that you would, your government would if the Tories were in power? I'm having a sense that you probably don't agree.
Well, it's our small businesses have borne the brunt of closures. And we see that from North Bay all the way up to New Liskeard. And it's hardworking women and men has lost their jobs. We're trying to bring back these jobs and rebuilding the main streets. And it's going to take money to reopen them and rebuild these businesses that have struggled, or they've closed their doors and not knowing if they'll ever be open. So the Canada's
do you have
Conservative.
a solution that may differ from Mr. Rota's?
Well, we're going to provide rebuild their main streets with a 25% credit on amounts up to $100,000. And it's just the beginning of the Canada's recovery plan for small businesses.
If I could jump in, Greg.
Yeah, go right ahead.
And Anthony, I appreciate that you thanked the NDP for their leadership on the wage subsidy, but would you concede that the Liberals initially offered a 10% wage subsidy and it was the NDP that pushed you towards the 75% wage subsidy?
There were discussions that took place. Exactly who came up with it. There was some negotiating back and forth. And I think what it was, during the first 6 months of this government, it was really nice to see all MPs working together.
Definitely.
And that's when a lot of this got done. And there was some negotiation. Right. So this was something that they started off and then realized, okay, we're going to need more. And the discussions took place, and we did go up to this.
Just a quick point directly to the voters is that's with 24 NDP MPs. We were able to push the Liberal minority government from a 10% wage subsidy to 75%, which supported not just the small businesses, but the workers that they employ as well.
Well, Scott,
if that's what we can do with 24 MPs, imagine what we can do if we increase the number of NDP MPs in the House.
well, you have the balance of power. That has a lot to do with it, though.
For sure. No matter who forms the government, the more NDP MPs that you have, the more support you're going to have for small businesses and for the workers.
All right,
If
Anthony.
I can respond to that, actually, it was the Liberals who put it forward and came up with the plan, and the negotiations took place. But there was that intent that's saying, okay, we'll try with 10 and then see where it goes. And then they ended up coming up with more and more, and the decision was made by the Liberals. I mean, yes, there was some influence there, but overall, I mean, it was a Liberal bill.
Okay, let's move on to question number 2. This one goes to Anthony first. The pandemic has been extremely hard on the business sector, especially, which was discussed briefly, the hospitality and service industry, which are still being hit hard. What is your party's plan to assist this difficult and hard-hit sector? Anthony goes first.
Well, what we're doing is we're extending the Canada Recovery Hiring Program to March 31st so businesses can hire more workers and keep Canadians getting back to the job. That's something that we really want to see happen. The other thing is, I mentioned earlier, is the tourism industry, especially in this area and as we go north. They've been hard hit, and I'm sure Stephen can attest to that with the business he's in as well. The temporary wage and rent support of up to 75% of their expenses to help them get through the winter has been extended in that industry, because we know they will spring back, and when we get back in spring, they will have stayed in business, they will be able to hire again, and will be able to take off as if, well, I'm not going to say as if nothing happened, but at least get off from the ground running, not having to climb out of a hole in order to start again.
Stephen, I wanted to get you to weigh in on this as well, because you are in that business, and government support is great, but do you want a hand up or a hand out?
Well, over the course of the pandemic, millions of Canadians lost their jobs, with women accounting for more than half over the year of employment losses. The tourism, hospitality sectors were among the hardest hit, as well as part-time temporary workers. To get the economy back on track, the Canada's recovery plan will recover millions of jobs in the sector, the hardest hit pandemic, and get many people back in good jobs and every part of our riding. So, yes, I own a company that primarily is 100% on tourism, and it's been tough over the last 18 months. Did not receive one grant or assistance with regards of tourism. So it's starting over again, and I feel for the small businesses like myself, and but we're going to rebound, and Canada's Conservatives has a plan. It's detailed, and
give me a couple of details then.
So it's we're going to get these small businesses up and running again.
How?
Well, it's we're going to. You got to invest in these companies, and you're going to have to give them some support with some grants and tax benefits, and get them rolling again.
Pretty quickly on that, Greg, yeah?
30, yeah.
Yep. Well, we've already talked about the role the NDP played in those wage subsidies and the other supports for small businesses and how we were able to push the Liberals. The one area I think the Liberals failed in this is that they didn't have their eyes on the ball when it comes to the biggest players, the massive corporations who we know used some of those subsidies, those wage subsidies, rather than use it to keep their employees on or to hire new employees, they use it to pay dividends to their shareholders. And that's something that the NDP will never take their eyes off. The NDP is making sure that those public dollars are being used to support small businesses and workers, not so that they can pay dividends to shareholders of the biggest corporations.
All right, we're going to move on now.
Actually, if I can respond to that,
You get 30
what
seconds,
happened is
Anthony.
that was one of the conditions. You cannot take the money. I mean, the airlines were the prime example. You could not get the money and pay out dividends. There had to be some conditions on there, so that didn't.
And yet we
didn't
saw
quite
about
happen.
$250 million going to pay dividends of those, the people using those subsidies to pay dividends to their shareholders. So those loopholes were wide open for corporations to take advantage of.
Moving on to question 3 goes to Mr. Trahan. We continue to hear from our members that they are unable, this is from the Chamber, to fill vacant employment opportunities as we reopen the economy. Does your party have a specific plan to assist and provide details? This question obviously from the North Bay and District Chamber of Commerce.
Well, the plan of Conservatives, Canada's Conservatives will ensure that we have some training they need for jobs for today and tomorrow, by supporting the union and similar training programs, encouraging employment to invest in their workers. We'll also help bring in women and new Canadians into skills trades. We're going to double the apprenticeship job creation tax for the next 3 years to help more places for apprentices. Increase the amount that can be claimed from $2,000 per person to per apprentice to $4,000 a year. Qualifying trades under the apprentices and job creation tax credits, and we'll invest $250 million over 2 years to create Canada Job Training Fund. The fund will be provided through grants, organizations, including unions, employers, apprentice training, delivery agents, post-secondary institutions, as well as community organizations for projects.
Okay.
To get people off,
Open it
laid
up.
off people's immediate
In other words, everyone else
access
weigh
to
in.
training.
You'll get your chance to rebut in a moment. Go ahead.
Sure. I mean, I've already mentioned how the NDP wants to enter long-term agreements with the small businesses to pay the employer portion of the CPP and the EI. This is going to give them more money to incentivize workers. I definitely agree with the question that is the number one concern of the small businesses that I've heard across this district is the ability to hire people. That's why we want to give those incentives and maintain the wage subsidy until all the restrictions are lifted so that they can incentivize workers with better jobs, better working conditions. That's really important for us. I mean, as far as training and education goes, the NDP is the party of lifelong education, and that's always been the case. But we also need to support the businesses so they can provide good jobs.
Anthony, why do you think, as a kind of a sort of a follow-up to this, that there are so many job openings that they can't fill?
Well, I was going to get to that because when you look at it, that job shortage was there prior to COVID-19. It's not something new, and it's something demographers have been saying is going to happen for a while. One of the things we've done is opened up the rural immigration program, and I was key in making sure that that went through. It allows businesses to bring in immigrants who will do the work. There is a shortage of manpower, of resources, of human resources in the north. And by identifying someone and bringing them in, that we can have the economy start going again. And the nice thing about this is, as you bring in more people, they create more wealth, more money is spent, and there's more jobs created. And it just kind of rolls on from there. And that's something that I think is very important. One of the other issues that we've been working on, we've got 7 out of 10 provinces with an agreement and one territory with an agreement on childcare. Now, childcare sounds like, oh, that's a family thing. It's an economic issue because we've already got it down to $10 a day childcare. And what happens is this allows parents to get out to work. So instead of having one having to stay home, they can both go out. It fills the need that is required
Okay, Anthony,
for
I'm going to stop you there
employees.
just for time purposes. Any other rebuttals before I move on to the next question?
Sure, I'll take the bait on the childcare thing. It's great that the Liberals have started working on universal affordable childcare in the months leading up to this election, but we've literally been listening to them make those promises for more than 30 years. In my grade 8 civics class, there was a work that we had to do to put the platforms together of the parties in 1993, and the Liberals were promising universal affordable childcare in 1993, and now they want us to pat them on the back for delivering something or starting to deliver on something that should have been done 30 years ago. We all understand the importance of universal affordable childcare. Why hasn't it happened yet?
Okay.
Well, I can answer that. No, I have to answer that because, I mean, it's pretty rich coming from the NDP because back in 2006, we had a plan already in place. Ken Dryden had put it together. He was the minister responsible. We had a daycare system in place and ready to go. And then what happened is Jack Layton and the NDP voted against the Liberals because they were supporting all along, and suddenly they decided, no, we're not going to support it anymore because he figured he could pick up a few more seats. What happened? We ended up with Stephen Harper. All that daycare work went out the window and it's gone. The same thing happens now.
Okay, let's
If the
move on to
Conservatives
question
It
number
might go out the window
$10
again
a
because you
day
called this election.
daycare,
right?
that's right. If the Conservatives get in, it'll go out the window again.
So you should not have called this election. You should have worked with the NDP to work on affordable
We should have
childcare.
waited for the
And we
NDP
could
to
have-
ambush
we
us,
could-
is what you're
We could be in
saying.
Ottawa right now doing it.
We should have waited for the NDP
This
to wait in the
election
bush
should-
and
we
just
shouldn't be
jump
on
out
this
at the
stage.
last minute and destroy everything.
We shouldn't
like
be
they
on the
did in
stage.
2006.
You should be in Ottawa right now working on this rather than being on the stage.
Oh, there's a moment of silence and clarity, so let's move on.
I can
to
keep going if you like.
No, we'll move on to question number 4. This one goes to Scott. Most recently, it was announced that FedNor is now a standalone ministry assisting Northern Ontario businesses, not-for-profits, colleges, and universities. Will your party continue to invest in the North through this organization and provide support to small business?
Absolutely. We've believed for a long time that FedNor should be a standalone agency. We're glad to see that's finally happened. We're happy to continue with that and to make sure that those investments are really addressing the health and well-being of the economy here and the overall health and well-being of our communities. There's a whole lot of, we're the only party that has a Northern Ontario specific platform, and there's a whole lot of things in there that we want to do to improve the economy here. Maybe a few examples: rural transportation routes, we need to invest in those. We've lost a lot of our rural transportation routes with Greyhound. We want to bring back the Ontario Northlander. We want to invest in.
Is that affordable, though? Because I keep hearing it's not affordable.
I mean, the PBO is a nonpartisan agency. They've costed our plan, and they've said that we're the party that's going to have the lowest deficits over the next 5 years. That's the lowest deficits, I'll repeat that. Lower than the Conservatives, lower than the Liberals. And that's for one reason. It's because we're the only party that understands the need. And when you're going to make massive social investments, which we all agree we need, you also need to balance that with meaningful revenues. Right, I have a whole list of what the PBO has costed as far as our revenues, and they've been clear that outside of the first year where we're going to make major investments, the rest of the parliamentary term, we are proposing the lowest deficits, the most spending, the most ambitious plans with the lowest deficits.
Okay, we're going to open it up then because
I've been
we don't
reading
have time for
different
the entire
reports. I'm
list.
sorry, I haven't seen that. But FedNor is an important agency, and it is now an agency, finally. And it's something that the MPs from Northern Ontario, especially in the Liberal Party, have been lobbying for and working hard to make sure happens. By being an agency, what happens is the decisions are made in Northern Ontario for Northern Ontario. I had put forward a private member's bill that was passed by the House. Unfortunately, it didn't get royal assent because the government of the day didn't believe in it. So they killed the bill. What ended up happening is we kept fighting for it, and now it is an agency, and it has its own board that is based here. As a program, it's controlled by whoever the minister is, no matter where they're from, and it's controlled out of Ottawa. Now it will have more independence and be more reactive to what happens here, and making sure that we can plan ahead and make sure that the program actually works for Northern Ontarians.
All right, let's move on to Stephen.
Yeah, absolutely. We've I think, beat this to death here. FedNor is a vital organization that's part of the Northern Ontario. The small businesses, it's a win-win situation for small businesses and for everybody that's in business for the North. So, thanks.
Everybody's in agreement. So, okay, let's move on to question number 5. This one goes to Stephen this time. Some of the leading economists have stated that the current spending levels by the federal government will not allow Canada to balance its budget for decades. What is your party's plan surrounding the current deficit, and will you continue to deficit spend as required to restart or maintain the economy? A very, very interesting issue.
Well, Canada's Conservative government, we're going to balance the budget in the next decade. It's a bold approach, and it's an approach that we're going to take very seriously, and we're going to have some stimulus and as well as some recovery. So it's.
Well, how do you, I just need a couple specifics from you because that's just generalities.
Well, we need to, you got to fight inflation, and we know the inflation is going to be well over probably 3%, so we're going to have to tackle that and get that in order. Bring down some costs for food and gases and stuff like that. So it's we have to kind of capture all of that and move forward.
Okay, anybody?
Well, if you look at it, the spending that's gone on, it was to keep us afloat. And the question you have to ask yourself is, what would have happened if that spending had not taken place? It would have been carnage. Canadians would have suffered, and it would have been a disaster for the economy. What we've done is we've kept the economy at an even keel, and now with COVID being over, we're starting to pick up again. And I have
You're saying COVID's over, because a lot of people don't believe that right now.
We're starting to see the end. It's not tomorrow, Greg. It's going to take a while, but people are starting to work. They're starting to go back, and things are starting to pick up. As we see the economy going well, we'll see more money coming in, more money being made, more profits. We'll see people making money on wages, more taxes. That's how you build an economy. You make sure that people are doing well. As they're doing better, they start paying more taxes. Not high taxes, not to a certain group, but just more taxes because they're earning more money.
Scott, I want to give Scott a chance to jump in.
And then that money goes to pay down deficits and debt, and we get to the other end.
Sure. I mean, you and Anthony may not have heard this already, but people at home are welcome to go online and search this up. The CBC did a story about it the other day. The NDP has released their costed platform. It's been reviewed by the nonpartisan Parliamentary Budget Office. They've told us that our deficits are going to be the lowest in most of the next 5 years. And that comes from making sure that the right people are paying for the pandemic recovery. And that's the very, very rich, the ultra rich, the most profitable corporations, and the people who've been cheating on their taxes by using offshore tax havens. I'll give you some numbers quickly if you want, Greg. The PBO has said we're going to raise $60 billion by a 1% wealth tax on people who have $10 million and more. We're going to raise $25 billion by bringing the corporate tax rate back to where it was a few years ago, to 18%, and that only applies to corporations that make $500,000 a year or more. We're going to raise $14 billion from an excess profit tax that only targets the most profitable corporations that have benefited from pandemic conditions. We're going to raise $12 billion by cracking down on tax cheats. These are the very, very highest earners and the biggest corporations that are hiding their money overseas and avoiding paying their share. So that's $166 billion that we're going to raise.
We have to move on to question number 6, and this goes to Anthony Rota. Filling jobs in Northern Ontario continues to be a problem, as we discussed earlier. Immigration, and you mentioned it briefly, has been targeted as a solution to some of these issues. Do you support the Rural and Northern Immigration Pilot Program, and would your party continue to invest in this program and the supports to attract newcomers to Northern Ontario? Anthony gets to go first.
I was one of the ones spearheading that program, so yes, I am in favor, and the rural immigration program will be part of the solution of getting more jobs in Northern Ontario. And as I mentioned earlier, as we get more qualified people in who are willing to work and grow the economy, they'll be working hard, they'll be creating more wealth, and creating more jobs, because as it grows, as the economy grows, we get more and more people who are hired, more people who are doing well, spending money, and it's almost like one encourages the other. So yes, the rural immigration program, I can take some credit for that, and we worked very hard to get it. I want to see it go ahead.
Anybody? Steve?
Yeah, absolutely. You know what, we see it here in North Bay. We have had some immigration come in here. Great people starting up businesses. They work hard, and absolutely, there's a lot more talent out there we could use. The people that are coming in that has different skills and abilities and trades. Absolutely, it's the Conservatives would also endorse that.
Scott, you want to weigh in for 30 seconds?
Sure, it's a really important issue. We have a declining population here in the north. We have a natural birth rate that cannot sustain the population. We absolutely rely on immigration to sustain our economy. As we said so many times, we need workers for our businesses. Immigration is a key portion of that. We want to help immigrants contribute to the economy by improving foreign credentials recognition. We want to protect the right of foreign workers. We saw during COVID how bad foreign temporary workers are treated in this country, and it's absolutely shame. All of Canadians should be ashamed of that. We should be doing more to protect and encourage foreign workers to come in and do some of the work that we need for our businesses here.
That moves us on to question 8. Mr. Trahan will deal with this first. In your opinion, was Canada prepared for a pandemic? What would a government, CPC government, do differently?
Well, Canada's Conservatives will ensure that Canada is ready to face future pandemics, including elevated risk of bioterrorism threats through production of novel pathogens. Our goal is simply be prepared, take a rapid action so we can protect the health of Canadians while avoiding long-term impacts through the economy and mental health. So we need to partner up with pharmaceutical companies to increase productions in critical medicines, active pharmaceutical ingredients in Canada, assign the ultimate responsibility Public Health Agency of Canada to a qualified physician. Overhaul Canada's pandemic plan and preparedness to include a focus, infection, disease, bioterrorism.
Let's open it up. Before we open it up, Stephen, I want to get you to, are you happy and satisfied with what the government did in handling the pandemic to this point?
No, absolutely not.
Why?
They should have done things way before. When we saw things coming across Europe, we should have took our own borders and start closing down, get our people home that needs to be coming home, and get looked after our own. And our PPE was non-existent.
Okay, now we're going to open it up.
Well, if I can respond to that, as we saw it happen, we started reacting to it right away and actually planning. The country was not ready. We couldn't produce our own vaccines. The one vaccine manufacturer that we had was sold off by the Conservatives, well, 40 years ago by Mulroney. It was gone. And that's the problem. We've started again working with a French company who is in Mississauga. We will be producing the vaccines needed in Canada. That's a good start. It's not enough. We have to continue with research through the National Research Council to make sure that we have a backing there. The PPE, that we started working and getting it. The big success here is the negotiations that took place to get the vaccines. I mean, I understand the opposition parties were complaining. They didn't understand what was going on, and that's understandable. It was complicated. But what happens is we negotiated from January all the way down, and we said, okay, we're going to get enough vaccines. No, we're not. They were complaining about it. But what we did is we predicted about the end of September.
I'm going to give Scott a chance.
Talk
we got all the
not
vaccines
understanding,
in
yeah.
by August.
Anthony,
we're there.
I'm going to give Mr.
On the
We've got
issue of not
highest
understanding.
vaccination rate in the world
Okay.
as a country.
On the issue of not understanding the needs of the Canadian people during the pandemic, we're talking about a party, and no disrespect to Anthony Rota, we're talking about a party that suggested a 10% wage subsidy for small businesses. I think that demonstrates a lack of understanding of what the needs of the small businesses were. This is a party that proposed a $1,000 CERB, as though $1,000 was going to be enough to help people who had lost their jobs through a month of expenses. That demonstrates how out of touch the Liberals are with the realities of small businesses and workers and average people. But the real issue in the pandemic is that it demonstrated how unstable our economy was, how we had a lack of resiliency as a result of poverty, as a result of the housing crisis, as a result of the opioid epidemic. All of these issues that existed before the pandemic, that had negative trend lines before the pandemic, were just laid bare by the pandemic and exacerbated by the pandemic. And we see that here in North Bay, and I've heard about it from every town that I've visited in this district. Mattawa, New Lisker, Temagami, Cobalt, Haileybury. We all got to see just how much we lack resiliency. And the NDP understands that major social investments are needed to make our communities more stable,
We
safer,
just didn't have the right
more
leader.
resilient.
We didn't have the right leader for the
And
time of this pandemic.
lowest deficits.
That's first and foremost. So that's right off the bat. We didn't have the right person to take control, which was Justin. And
What do you suggest? What kind of leadership are you suggesting?
Well, he should have been up in front and tackled this right off the bat. He should have been looking after the residents of Canada, closed our borders down, did a little more than what he did.
Okay, we're going to go on to the next question.
We took care of everything right from the
we're
beginning.
going to go on to the next question,
Everybody, we
Anthony.
hear complaints about people not doing, we did too much.
Anthony,
Now we
we're
didn't
going to
do
go on to
enough.
the next question. I'm not going to get
It just doesn't make any sense. We're all over
Okay.
the place.
This one goes to Scott first. Taxing the rich is something that we hear from the NDP all the time in election time. How confident are you, though, that if you tax the rich and the multinational corporations, will they just simply pull their money out of Canada and relocate to a cheaper locale if there's higher taxes imposed on them in this country? Is this a legitimate plan to help pay for more social programs? And that's a question that
this
the
is
NDP
a common critique. This is something we hear from people all the time when you talk about asking the rich or making the rich pay their fair share. All right, a quick little story I'll tell you. When I was visiting in Vietnam, which is a communist country and ostensibly has no private industry whatsoever, I was walking in Ho Chi Minh City one day and it started to rain. Within a minute of it starting to rain, there was an umbrella salesman on the corner of every street. Where there is a dollar to be made, someone is going to fill that space and make the dollar, no matter what the conditions are. We have a stable country here. We have a relatively stable economy, even though we saw what happened in the pandemic and how most of the Western countries had less stability than what we expected. Corporations are going to come here to make money. Where there's money to be made, they're going to fill those spaces. I really don't buy for 1 second that if we raise the marginal tax rate from the top marginal rate from 33% to 35%, which is what we're proposing, that all of a sudden people are going to stop investing their money.
Okay,
here.
we're going to open it up now.
That's still a much lower marginal tax rate than in most other countries that have 40%, 45%, 50%.
Anybody else want to jump in?
When we first started, we raised the tax on the wealthiest. There was a 1% raise so that we can pay for some of the programs. And what Scott is talking about is the umbrella salesman on the corner. Those are not well-paying jobs. What we want to do is make sure that the larger companies stay here. And I'm not saying not to increase taxes, but to increase to the rate that they're talking about, we'll chase them to another country. We have to do, it's a very strange balancing act that you have to do. These are not multinationals, these are transnationals. They really don't care where they set up. And what we have to do is balance it so that we do keep them here, the well-paying jobs remain, and those jobs keep growing. And that is not an easy, it's nice to make a statement, but when you have to balance it and actually have to work it through, it takes time and it takes negotiations with the people.
A chance to rebut.
We're talking about raising the top margin rate, as I mentioned, to a rate that's still much lower than most other countries. And the corporate tax rate, we're talking about going from 15% to 18%, where it was just a few years ago. And when the corporate tax rate was 18% a few years ago, were all the corporations leaving and going to another country? No, they were still here trying to make a dollar because that's what corporations do. They go to where they can make profits and they invest. That's what's going to happen here. Sending it back to where the corporate tax rate was only a few years ago is not all of a sudden going to chase everybody away. I think that's fear-mongering. We're doing what has been done in lots of other countries, and this is how we're going to have the lowest deficits as we make major social investments to make life easier for people in this district. That's what it's about.
Okay.
Making life easier and making sure the right people pay for it.
All right, we're going to take a brief sojourn here from the three gentlemen here. Greg Galante is the candidate for the People's Party of Canada. He was born and raised in Hamilton, Ontario. He's had recreational property in the riding since 2000, became a permanent resident in 2014. Greg is of Italian and First Nation descent. In his spare time, you'll find him hunting, hiking the trails, or spending time with his teenage son. Greg is a recently retired captain serving in the Toronto Fire Service and was also a veteran for 5 years at the Canadian Armed Forces, the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders of Canada, and he has a taped presentation for us now.
Hi, I'm Greg Galante, PPC candidate for Nipissing-Timiskaming. As this election campaign unfolds, we've seen the leaders of the legacy parties, Justin Trudeau, Aaron O'Toole, and Jagmeet Singh, talk about a lot of different issues. The one issue they don't want to talk about is freedom. Specifically, your freedom. The freedom to decide what you put in your body and your children's bodies. They don't want to talk about it because they are quite comfortable creating two Canadas and two classes of Canadian citizens. One that's granted privileges based on towing the government line, and another class of citizens that are denied privileges and services because they've made an informed choice for themselves. This is not right. It's against the Constitution, it's against the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and it's against the Canada Health Act. Help Maxime Bernier and me take Canada back on September 20th. Vote PPC. Thank you.
Welcome back, everybody, as we continue tonight's candidates debate for the riding of Nipissing-Timiskaming for an election that is just 6 days away, which may be merciful for the candidates after pounding on doors and working on shoe leather the last few weeks. This next question, as we come back from break, goes to Anthony Rota. Prices of homes in North Bay, and people know this, have skyrocketed incredibly over the past year, and for a lot of people, especially young people, owning a home right now is out of reach. What plan does your party have to try to alleviate this housing crisis?
Well, we have a whole suite of things that we're working on and we've got in our platform. The first one, or what we've already done, is we've got rapid housing initiatives where we've got 9,200 units of affordable housing across Canada, $2.5 billion that will be going out there. That's already decided, that's done. But there's a new rent-to-own program where people can rent to own if they have the agreement in place. That is part of our platform. The nice one that I like for the platform is a tax-free first home savings account where people can put money aside and have it grow tax-free, then take it out without having to pay tax. If you're under 40, you can put up to $40,000 in there and have it grow tax-free. That will help you buy a house. The other thing we're putting in place is the home buyers Bill of Rights. You know, there's something called blind bidding where all the bids are open at once. And I was talking to a real estate agent the other day where there was a house that was up for sale for $360,000. And it ended up that everybody came in, but because everybody was coming in and they were opening all the bids at the same time, it sold for $450,000, which is great for the seller. But it caused someone from Toronto coming up, put a ridiculously high bid in it, and there's no transparency in that. So by putting that aside and having that, there's a whole bunch of stuff here that I could keep going, and I see you're going to stop me.
Okay, we're going to open it up to other people to comment on how to, and maybe even, is there a way to get house prices to drop a little bit?
Well, in any market, one thing that you can do to put downward pressure in any market, no matter what commodity you're talking about, is by injecting a massive supply at the bottom end of that market. That's what the NDP is proposing. And with respect to Anthony's comments, if the housing crisis was a priority for the Liberal Party, we would have seen action on that before. He mentioned the rapid housing initiative and the 9,000 units. Nipissing-Timiskaming received 0 of those units. There have been no help to us at all in the Nipissing-Timiskaming district.
You were at DSAB.
I was at the DSAB.
Did you apply for rapid housing?
We applied. We did 4 applications for. We had them all ready to go. We made 4 separate applications to the Rapid Housing Initiative, and we got 0. And part of that is because, no offense to Anthony, I respect him a lot, but we have our member is sitting as a speaker, right? He's not in the trenches fighting for these issues. He was elected to speaker, right? And the prestige of the speakership is great, but that is not what people in this district want. I haven't heard a single person say that at the doors. I have heard people talk about housing at the doors. That's literally the #1 issue that I've heard from people in this district, is the issue of the housing crisis. The NDP wants to build 500,000 units across the country over the next 10 years, not 9,000 units. We won't pat ourselves on the back for 9,000 affordable housing units.
Okay.
And we also want to do a 20% foreign ownership
Stephen,
tax.
go
So
ahead.
the Conservatives' recovery plan will address making homes more affordable for owners and as well as renters. We're going to build 1 million homes over the next 3 years. We're going to offer 7 and 10-year mortgages to make adjustments to the stress tests and insurance requirements to help people qualify for financing. Also, I want to also say is be reliable to partners in addressing housing needs for the Indigenous communities also.
I just want to comment on the speaker's job. I mean, you do have influence on everything, and you do have quite a bit more. There's not only prestige, but there is influence there, and it works very well. But
It didn't work on the Rapid Housing Initiative.
No, the rapid housing, the
got
applications,
0.
I remember looking at them, and they were horrible applications. I'm sorry. Like, if you would have done a good job, you would have got the money, but you didn't do a good job.
I would have supported
let's take a
any
look
application.
at $4 billion in new housing accelerator fund. That will produce 100,000 new homes. The way to bring down prices is to make sure that the number of houses is increased. Increase the supply, and the prices come down. Demand stays there and it gets filled. So we end up with more. And if you look at the Liberal plan, it's about creating more supply so that the prices come down. We're also going to ban foreign ownership for 2 years, so that if someone's coming in to speculate on a property and taking up a home, that will be stopped.
Okay,
So
anybody else wanna
Anthony's
weigh in
right,
here?
and that's why the Conservative government is going to build 1 million homes over the next 3 years, and then also stop the foreign investors who are not living here to moving into Canada to buying a home for the next 2 years. So You're going to need more houses.
We have a community advisory board that's mandated by the federal government in order to receive funding, and they have told us very clearly what they want as a plan. They gave us a 6-point plan. They endorsed a national plan to address the housing crisis. That plan was endorsed by the Social Services Board that I sit on. It was also endorsed by the North Bay City Council, which I sit on, because I brought it there. And that plan is mirrored in the NDP plan. What our local experts in the housing industry have told us is exactly what the NDP is proposing. It's a realistic plan, it's doable. It's great to hear the Liberals talking about the supply and the issue of supply, but they had 4 years of majority government between 2015 and 2019 to address this. This is not a new issue, and we have not had action on this.
That'll bring us on to the next question,
housing
and
is a
Stephen gets
relatively
to
new issue.
answer this question. The rising cost of food, and just drive by the gas station, is a real issue for people in low-income situations right now. Local seniors and pensions, for example, need to find ways to pay their bills, stay in their homes, and eat while their incomes do not increase because obviously they're on fixed incomes. Inflation not going well. What can you promise seniors that you will do, as they are an ever-growing population, to help wrangle the increasing costs that they are faced with every day? And Stephen gets to go first.
Stephen, sorry, is that Stephen?
Yeah, it's for Stephen.
Thanks. Great question. It's one of those things where you have to take it quite seriously. We see the cost of fuel, the groceries going up. So with the seniors, we can, with amending the home accessibility tax by increasing limits for $10,000 a dwelling to $10,000 a person, giving them the caregivers, a claim to medical expenses, tax credit, and trying and lower some of the costs for our aging people in our area.
Scott.
So the big ticket items that we are proposing for seniors are increased income security for seniors and also for people who are living with disabilities. But the one thing I heard over and over and over again from seniors, which is putting pressure on their pocketbooks and affordability, is the issue of prescription medication. I heard from a guy in West Ferris, an 86-year-old man whose wife worked for 30 some odd years for Sears, and when Sears went bankrupt, they lost their medical coverage and now they literally cannot afford their prescription medication. That is not normal in a rich country. We're the only rich country that has a universal healthcare system that does not have a universal pharmacare system. It doesn't have to be that way. We need the political will and the revenue that we're going to draw from the ultra-rich in order to pay for that, so that Canadians can pay for their prescription medication with their health card and not with their credit card. It does not have to be that way, and that is a Liberal commitment that the Prime Minister made that they did not deliver on and that they barely even worked on. Elect NDP MPs, and we're going to make pharmacare a priority for seniors.
Okay, Anthony, I got to give Anthony a couple of minutes here.
Yeah, no, the GIS was increased by 10%, and the GIS is then going up again by 500 and 750, depending if you're single or a couple. The OAS, in part of our platform, will be going up by 10% next year in July. Now, pharmacare. We've been negotiating, like the other negotiations, we've been negotiating with the provinces because it's not our jurisdiction. So far, we have one agreement with PEI, with pharmacare, and we're working with the other provinces. What we want to do is make sure that we do have the right agreements in place for every province. Unfortunately, to get them all in place at the same time would be very difficult. I understand the NDP says, oh, we're going to do all this. Well, it's not their jurisdiction. They have to work with the provinces. So when you're working with the provinces and coming up with an agreement, when one has it, the people of the province say, hey, how come we don't have it? So far for daycare, for example, Ontario does not have daycare yet. 7 of the provinces do. Ontario is not one of them.
Anthony, we're going to move on just for time
people
purposes
are
to
going
the
to
next
ask for it
question.
and demand it. Same thing with pharmacare.
In North Bay, this one goes to Scott first. We have a number of federally regulated employees, mail carriers, military service people, civil servants, to name just a few. Where does your party stand on mandatory vaccinations for federal public employees?
The NDP believes that vaccinations should be mandatory for federal employees. We believe that in cases where people don't want to be vaccinated, that we need to follow our collective agreements, that we need to make them accessible and limit the barriers to access to the vaccinations as much as we can, do whatever accommodations we can for the workers. But no, the NDP policy is that federal employees should be vaccinated.
And if they're not, what happens?
Well, at that point, you'd have to go to the collective bargaining agreement and whatever escalation, whatever the progression of discipline is.
Okay, I'm going to open it up because this is a hot topic issue. Go ahead, anybody.
I can't say that I disagree with Scott on that one. We have exactly the same policy where it is, if we get back in, it will be mandatory for federal employees and people who work for federally regulated companies to be vaccinated. Otherwise, there will be consequences. Like anything else, the consequences have to be worked on to make sure they're legal, make sure they're enforceable, and make sure that people can accept them. And it does take some negotiation. And
For those, Anthony, who don't, though, what do you know, there's been always talk of a two-tiered society, right? And for those who don't, what do you say to them?
The most important thing for a federal government is to protect its people and make sure that they're protected against any foreign threat. A foreign threat could be a threat coming into your body. That threat is outside of your body. And if you allow people to go around without a mask, we came in, we all had our masks on to make sure that we were safe. We wanted to make sure that we didn't infect each other. So,
I just want to ask,
making
I
sure
gotta
that
give,
we
I
have that
gotta
in
give
place,
Stephen a
we're-
chance here,
we're-
Anthony.
We're just making it safe for all
Anthony, I
Canadians.
need to give Stephen
Canada's
a chance.
Conservatives will, you'll have your right to make your own choice. Agree with the other parties here also, but we'll add one thing to it. So we can add some rapid testing. That could be possibly another option here.
Okay.
I
This
got
one
a
goes
call
to
today
Anthony.
from a lady who has to get a rapid test, and it cost her 2 a week, $40 each test. It's expensive.
Anthony, very rural riding, as you're all well aware.
Yes.
The need for high-speed broadband in rural and remote areas in Canada has become more heightened during the pandemic because of isolation, of course. More people work from home, which was an interesting turn of events. The Canada Universal Broadband Fund has now committed to a 6-year plan to protect all Canadians. What is your party's position on broadband investment and an additional investment in cybersecurity for Canadians as the universal broadband comes to fruition by 2027?
Yeah, no, the Universal Broadband Fund is something that I was very active in getting going and working with the minister who implemented it. And if you'll notice in our riding, we have pretty well close to full coverage coming up over the next 6 months to a year because of the funding that's come in. We've brought in, we've worked with the province and we've worked with individual smaller companies to make sure that everyone gets it. What happened with COVID is it really accentuated with everyone working from home that we needed broadband, and that's something that is well on its way. I've worked with the local mayors, local groups, and made sure that we got everything coordinated so that we could get ahead. And that's part of one of my strengths, is working with people to make sure that we fill it and go ahead.
Go ahead quickly.
So
This is about the only issue that's different for the rural communities than it is for the city of North Bay. I was expecting to hear a lot. The people in the rural areas are saying essentially the same thing as the people in North Bay, with the exception of this issue. The NDP wants to declare broadband and reliable broadband and cell phone an essential service. And if you want somebody who's going to stand up to the big telecoms to deliver these services at a reasonable price, it's not the Liberal Party or the Conservative Party.
All right.
The NDP is the one who's going to stand up to telecoms and cap prices because we're paying some of the highest prices in the world for data and for internet service.
Next question
So
goes to,
really,
go
I just
ahead.
want to add on to it a little bit too, is that, you know what, it's good that we have a lot of other companies that are coming in and helping out the communities up north as well as out here, like even in East Ferris. We have companies that are putting up their own money to invest in small communities to make sure that people has internet services for when their kids are at home or as well as for small businesses. So by 2025, we should be there should be a good in our riding here anyway in our district. We should be covered, and everybody should be in a better position. By getting these other companies in here, it's going to actually help everybody out. It's going to bring down the pricing and be more competitive, and it's going to be. I think it's by 2025. We should be in
Okay,
good
let's
shape.
move on to the next question. This one might be a little more contentious. This one goes to Stephen Trahan first. The North Bay area has seen a drastic increase in crime and drug use. From a federal standpoint, what programs or supports would your government put in place, if elected, to help ease the burden on local police forces and municipalities?
Well, the Canada's Conservative Recovery Plan will invest $325 million over the next 3 years to create 1,000 residential drug treatment beds, and 50 recovery community centers across Canada. We're going to enhance the delivery and culturally appropriate addiction treatment preventions services in First Nation communities with high needs. We're going to provide $1 billion over the 5 years to boost funding for Indigenous mental health and drug treatment programs, and provinces to ensure that we have Noxlin kits available free across Canada. We're going to ensure that the people that are struggling with addictions and has the opportunity to recover.
What about crime?
Well, it's, you know what, if we can get people to know and we can get these treatment places here. And actually, you know what, we have some decent places here in North Bay. We have some really good treatment places here. If we can get some of these people to recognize that they do have a problem, and we can start making a few success stories and getting some of these people turned around, I think when we can capture that and promote it, and I think that, you know what, it's a
But I
right
will ask
sense
you
of
one quick
direction here.
follow-up before I open it up. Are you saying, though, that drug use is directly tied to crime or other, because not everybody that's a criminal necessarily is a drug user, fair?
That's more than fair, yes. But it's, you know what, with the people that are, you know, needs a certain amount of money to, you know, fix their addiction. They're out, you know, not working right now, so they're doing other means right now. So it's, yes, so it's, they're doing,
Okay,
they're
we're going to
finding
open it
ways
up.
and
Thank you, Steve. Go ahead, Scott.
As a
quickly.
North Bay City Councillor, I've had some extremely emotional and difficult conversations with some of our citizens over the past summer who've been the victims of really, really scary situations. I don't want to talk about the specifics, I keep that private to those people, but I've definitely felt that personally as somebody who lives in downtown North Bay. We do have a serious problem happening in our city here and across the district. We have a community safety and well-being plan that was just passed by the city of North Bay. In this plan, they identified the 3 risk factors that were having the biggest impact on our community safety and well-being. And this is a plan that is under the Police Act, so it's meant to talk about the root issues of crime. And the police themselves, the other service partners, the hospital, the people working on the front line, social workers, we talked to them and we got their input. They said the same thing.
What did they say?
Well, we also looked at the academic literature, which said the exact same thing. And the members of the public all said the exact same thing. They all identified the same 3 risk factors: housing, mental health, addictions. This is the issue that's happening in our city. We all know it. And I talked to the people at the
So
doors
your
throughout this
attack
district.
plan is, what would your attack plan be?
The NDP is the party that understands we need major investments in our social infrastructure and the social determinants of health. We cannot address the issue of mental health and addictions before you address the issue of housing. Once you address the issue of housing,
Okay, I'm
you
going
need
to
to
stop you
include
there for
mental
time
health and
purposes.
addictions.
Anthony, things aren't the same as they were downtown a few years ago.
It is a very serious problem here in Canada. Last year, there was 6,214 people who died from overdoses. In North Bay, there's 1 to 2 people a week who die from overdoses. Where is this
But I'm
coming
talking about
from?
North Bay and to a lesser extent New Liskeard. Anthony.
I understand that, but I mean, this is a problem that's right across the country. I have the
Okay.
stats I don't have the stats for New Liskeard. I'll have those tomorrow night. But what happens is it's a societal problem. It starts off with trauma, and it leads to mental illness, and then you want to dull the pain that's there. Then you start looking at things and you say, how do I dull it? And you start on the opioids. You become addicted to it. It gets rid of the pain, but then you've got to get more, and that's where the crime comes in. It's all related. And the police officers do go out there, but they're not trained social workers. They're police officers having to deal with crime. This is not...
But you have to hear from people, Anthony, who do say they're scared to go downtown in North Bay.
No question about it. What are we doing about it? We've got $3.2 billion going in to make sure that we have more doctors, more nurse practitioners, and more nurses coming in to take care of them.
does anybody else want to
and
weigh in
having
before I
more
move on to
problems.
I live in downtown
Again,
North Bay. The
$45
only
million.
property I own in the world is in downtown North Bay. I'm raising my family in downtown North Bay. In a regular course of my affairs, I almost never leave downtown North Bay. This is my neighborhood. I've been watching the health and well-being of my neighborhood stretch to the seams. All of my neighbors understand that, and we all understand what the issue is: housing, mental health, addictions, and the NDP is the party that you can count on to make those investments to address that issue.
All right, for
I
time
think we
purposes,
all
we're going to
agree
move
on
on.
that.
to
I
the
just
next-
think it's the Liberals that are our solution, not the
All right,
NDP.
well, I'm going to move on to question 20, and this one goes to Scott. This question submitted by Jamie Lynn Sluman Brown, an addictions therapist, related topic obviously, at the Community Counseling Center of Nipissing in the city. It's a fairly lengthy question, so bear with me. She asked a question on behalf of herself, her agency, colleagues, etc. Through the past year and a half, we've seen a health crisis response and what it looks like from government. The COVID-19 health crisis has seen the loss of 8 lives in the Nipissing district since the pandemic began. While this loss is tragic, in the year 2020 alone, 51 people in this riding lost their lives to drug overdoses. The difference in the government's response to these health crises demonstrates a health inequity in our system. Harm reduction practices are evidence-based and have proven to be successful at reducing stigma, discrimination, and overdoses when implemented. If elected, what action would your government take to ensure that harm reduction policies, I know we've kind of covered this a little bit, and resources are put in place to effectively respond to the overdose crisis that is occurring in our district? And additionally, how would you ensure this is addressed within our local Indigenous communities as well? You get to go first, Scott.
So this is a really, really important question. I'm really glad that Jamie Lynn asked that question. I sit with Jamie Lynn on the Harm Reduction Committee and on the Safer Supply Committee. It's an issue that I'm personally extremely passionate about, something I take personally. This is a complicated issue, and there's a whole lot of controversial points of view and different points of view, but we need to center the loss of life. Our neighbors, our family members, our friends are dying as a result of this opioid crisis at the rate, as Anthony mentioned, about 2 a week in this district. That needs to be centered. We need to be focused on that. The NDP...
And that doesn't get the publicity that...
It doesn't get the publicity. I've tried everything I can do as a city councillor to be a champion for that issue. If anyone knows the work that I do as a city councillor, that issue never gets out of my mouth. It's related to housing. It's related to mental health.
Okay. And other people get to have it.
Can I speak about what we're going to do?
10 seconds.
We want to declare a national public health emergency, and we want to increase harm reduction policies to make sure that we prevent the loss of life. Policies that have been implemented in other countries
10 seconds are
to
up.
great
Sorry,
success.
Scott. Anybody else want to weigh in here?
Yes, on the Indigenous issue, we've committed to spend $1.4 billion on distinction-based mental health. And what that does is that distinguishes where the mental health is taking place, whether it's on reserve or in cities for Indigenous people. And it is out there. People are either depressed or they've got PTSD, and it's something that they need some support for. And that is something that we have to continue. $4.5 million on a national health structure where we can get all the provinces working together, again, cooperation, working together so that we can get a program out there. It's nice to say, okay, we've got to put them aside or we've got to do something with them. Look, I still maintain, and I've been pushing for this in Ottawa, I can see it coming, it's the Portuguese model, where you legalize all drugs, but if you get caught using, you either have to pay a fine, or it's a large fine, or you have to go for treatment and rehab. But in order to do that, you have to get the institutions.
Okay, for
in place
time
that are gonna
purposes,
give that
Steve, do
rehab.
you have anything you want to weigh in here
Yeah,
before?
thanks. Yeah, pretty lengthy question there, but and you're right. We have to partner with the provinces to make sure that we're everybody's on the same platform. And I'll add on there, just with regards to the Indigenous part of the question, is that Canada's Conservatives are to invest $1 billion over the 5 years to boost funding for Indigenous mental health and drug treatment programs.
All right, Anthony, before we move on, I'll give Scott a couple of 30 seconds. We got to go to a break soon. I mean, this is an extremely difficult problem that's getting worse all the time. And while overdoses aren't, you don't catch them from somebody else, it is a huge societal problem. And is there enough resources, or do you need to spend more money to attack this problem than you have been spending on it?
No question, there's more that has to be spent. It's not so much just throwing money at it, it's how you throw it at it. It's making sure that the resources are there to treat the addiction. You've got mental illness, you've got
But your
trauma.
party's been in power for 6 years. Why is it taking so long?
This is growing slowly, and now it's reached, almost epidemic proportions. We've got things that we've put in place, and we've started. We've had a minority government. It's not always easy to put stuff through. You've got one
Well, you had
part
4
that,
years of majority government too, though, Anthony.
Yeah, and exactly. And we have put stuff in place over the years. I can run down the list if you
No,
give me the
we don't
time.
have time for the whole list,
Okay, I didn't think you
unfortunately.
would.
Scott, you
I'm
got 30
really glad that
seconds.
Anthony brought up the Portuguese model. It's one of the possible models, also the Swiss model. Those were implemented in conservative countries who were overwhelmingly opposed to them at first, but after 10 years of those services and those programs, now everybody understands how they reduce the harm to the whole communities. Business leaders love those policies. But I agree with you, Greg. This is a problem that has been exacerbated by the pandemic, but it wasn't caused by the pandemic. This was an issue before the pandemic, and people were dying before. I don't understand, if Anthony is here promoting the Portuguese model, why we haven't seen harm reduction services increase in our community, why we've continued to see people die when where this is totally and wholly preventable.
I have to stop
Drug
you
policy
there.
is...
We have to go to a break.
It is provincial
Things are
jurisdiction.
starting to heat up here a little bit. We'll come back with more of the All Candidates debate right here on your TV right after this. Everybody, Greg Esterbrooks here. We are at the Capitol Center for the All Candidates debate for Nipissing-Timiskaming 2021, 6 days away from the election. Anthony, you're going to get this next question first. This comes from Chief Scott McLeod of the Nipissing First Nation. Obviously, then everybody gets to weigh in right after that. 94 recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Justice Murray Sinclair stated, quote, "Canada must move from reconciliation to action," unquote. "We have not seen enough action. What specific steps will you and your government take if elected?" And again, that comes from the chief.
Well, so far we've worked across federal governments with the federal government with our partners, and 80% of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action involving the Government of Canada are now completed or being processed and underway. That is the first step. We have to implement it because we put the money into it, we put the time into it, and we got the feedback. We know what part of the solution is. It's time to act on it, and we are acting on it. And we want to continue. Don't forget,
How are you acting on it, Anthony? I just want to give me a couple
implementing. We've got 80%. Do you want me to go through each and every one of them?
No, but
I
a
mean,
couple
what
of
it is
important ones would be good.
80% of the report is either in place or being enacted. So it's not like it's being ignored. So it is going ahead, and it is very important because the Truth and Reconciliation is something I've had the pleasure of sitting down with.
The reason I ask you that in a follow-up,
Yes.
Anthony, is because when Scott says we have not seen enough action, that's kind of a pointed criticism.
I'm wondering where he's not seeing the action if 80% of it has been put in. Jeff,
I mean,
sorry.
I would point to immediately the first section of the calls to action, which deals with child welfare. The Canadian Human Rights Tribunal has ruled on a number of occasions against the federal government, saying that we're underfunding child welfare services to Indigenous communities and Indigenous kids. And rather than accept that ruling and deal with it, the Liberal Party decided to spend $100 million in court challenging those rulings, keeping Indigenous children in court cases, rather than going to the table and actually addressing the gap in funding for child services. These are Indigenous kids who are being taken out of their communities and put into underfunded services. The NDP would, I mean, for me personally, we're talking about boil water advisories, we're talking about Joyce's principle, which is equal access to healthcare, we're talking about Shannon's dream, which is equal access to education, but you got to start with child welfare. For me personally, the fact that we're still underfunding welfare for Indigenous children and taking them to court rather than abide by the Canadian Human Rights Tribunals and actually addressing that gap is shocking to me, and I think shocking to the Canadian people.
Okay, Stephen, do you have anything you want to add on this before I get to Anthony?
Sure. So the Conservative Party supports the treaty and the rights for the process of reconciliation with Canada's Indigenous people. I think also we need to fund the investigation out of the former residential schools in Canada where the unmarked graves may exist, including the sites where children have already been discovered. We need to ensure that proper resources are allocated for the communities to re-enter the community and honor the individuals discovered through the investigation according to the wishes of the next of kin. Also, I would say also we need to build a national monument in Ottawa to honor the residential school survivors as well as the children who were lost.
Should there be investigations criminally into some of these activities?
Absolutely. The NDP believes in appointing a special prosecutor to investigate whether or not we should be bringing charges against the perpetrators of the residential school atrocities and other atrocities against Indigenous people.
Okay, Anthony.
If I can go back to the accusation of the government taking children to court, and I asked the Justice Minister exactly what was going on, because I mean it didn't make any sense the way I was reading it. There's some residential schools, people who went to residential schools, the records are there, and some people want them completely destroyed because it's something that they don't want to live with. So what's happening is they want them destroyed. We have other people who want their records, and they should have the right to them. The court case is trying to keep the records up long enough so that people who want them can get them.
That's not the issue I'm referring to. I'm referring to child welfare services.
But that's not the government taking child welfare to court.
Well, it is. It's the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal has ruled against the federal government, saying that those services are underfunded for Indigenous kids, and the Canadian government, rather than dealing with those judgments, is appealing it in court to the tune of $100 million. That's the issue I'm talking about.
Well,
it's not residential schools, but
just
it's still taking Indigenous
3,300
kids out of their community and putting them in underfunded services.
Yeah, we've just created 3,300 new spaces to help children stay in their communities, and that's something
This
that
is
we're working on.
compensation
It's
for
something that
kids who
grows
went
up.
into the child welfare services and underfunded. This is a ruling done by the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal to compensate the children and the families who were put into underfunded services. And rather than deal with that, we're appealing that and using public dollars to challenge them rather than pay them. That's something I don't agree with. That's something the NDP doesn't agree with. And I'm sure that you personally don't agree with that either.
The question is, how much do you give? I know they were talking about $12,000 at one point. They were talking about $10,000. You know
So
what?
use your time to
doesn't
negotiate
do a
that
lot.
settlement.
We have to find something that helps them get over that. Giving them money just like that, what that does is it feels good for the first month, then it's gone,
Okay, guys.
and it doesn't help.
Question 27 will go to Mr. Trahan. The majority of First Nations citizens across Canada have to live in urban centres like North Bay to access employment and education. Would your government ensure that off-reserve First Nations members enjoy the same income tax exemptions as those who work on a reserve? This from Morris Switzer, a citizen of the Mississaugas of Alderville First Nation and the president of the North Bay Indigenous Friendship Centre. So, Stephen, you're up first with this one.
Well, that's a good question. Should they pay taxes on the reserve? That's what you're saying?
Well, I'll read you the question again. Would the government ensure that off-reserve First Nations members enjoy the same income tax exemptions as those who actually work on the reserve?
Well, I'm not too sure how to answer that, but I would say that if you're working off-site on the reserve, then yes, you should be paying.
Okay, open it up. Who wants to go first?
I'll be fully honest, I am not sure what the NDP position is on that. I don't want to make up an answer.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Anthony?
I better leave it there.
I'm afraid I don't have much on it, but if the agreements are there from past treaties, and Morris knows a lot about treaties, I mean, he's almost an expert on it. The agreement was that people on reserve do not pay, not off reserve. So it would have to take more negotiations and new negotiations and some kind of middle ground found between the government and those living off reserve.
All right, we're going to stay with Indigenous issues. This one goes to Scott first. Thousands of unmarked graves, we've talked about it, still needs to be talked about, believed to be children who attended residential schools in Canada have been discovered in the past year. Has the government done enough, in your view, to help support generations of Indigenous people who have had to deal with the loss of family and friends through the years? You're first.
I think the answer to that is pretty clear, and I'm not sure there'll be much disagreement from the other parties on this, but I think it's clear that we haven't done enough. There's key portions of the truth element of truth and reconciliation that we still haven't dealt with. It's really difficult for families to deal with those kinds of traumas if we still haven't uncovered what the story is or what the truth is about those situations. one of the things the NDP wants to move on very quickly is not only giving resources to track down the graves and to bring all those children home and to find out what those stories are, but is also to compel the people who are running the residential schools to hand over all of their records so that we can find out the truth of that. That's the first part for someone being able to move to the reconciliation.
How about teaching this in school for the younger set?
Absolutely, absolutely. The NDP has got plenty of stuff on that too about Indigenous-based curriculums, both for on-reserve schools, Indigenous-led schools, and off-reserve schools. That's a key portion of this. That's the key part of the truth part. I know that I didn't start learning about the realities of residential schools till I was in my late teens, and then I did a university degree which dealt a lot with colonial history, so I was privy to that. But now I'm very fortunate to say that my son...
We're going to open it up, because I'm going to say I was probably in my 50s, or about 50 when I first heard about it, which is tragedy in itself. Anthony?
No, I mean, education is the big part, and the federal government has committed to paying to find more unmarked graves. And that's something that is out there and willing to work with First Nations. Education is key for two reasons. One, to find out what our real history is. We have to know our history, otherwise we'll repeat it. The other one is our history. I was there for Bill C-61, which allowed the Anishinaabe of Ontario to teach and create their own curriculum. What's nice about that is they were writing the history books and the story so that people reading it, the students, can identify with what's going on. I always use the example that I did. When I grew up, I went to a French school. So history started in 1534 with the arrival of Jacques Cartier and ended on the plains of Abraham. People who went to an English school, well, it started on the plains of Abraham and went on after that. Nothing happened before, and it's still going great. But Indigenous people did not have input in there. It's important that they write the books, write the history book, so that
I got to
they can
give Stephen
learn
a second, or do you want to
and
take
students can
Sure,
identify
I'll just
with
say,
what is
add
going
on to it here also is absolutely for the education part of it, to develop and detail a set of resources to educate the Canadians of all ages on the tragic history of the residential schools in Canada.
All right, let's move on to the next question, which will go to Mr. Rhoda first. The Liberal government will miss a target it set during the 2015 federal election campaign to lift all long-term drinking water advisories in First Nations by March of 2021. In some cases, the targets will be missed by several years. What is your party's stance on making sure all people in Canada will have access to clean drinking water? Anthony goes first.
Actually, we've committed enormous amounts of money to doing it. When we came in 2015, there was 105 drinking water advisories, long-term. We lifted 109. So we've not only lifted the 105, we've discovered more. 68% of them are completely gone, and 20% of them are about to be lifted and under construction. And when you look at it, 97% have been taken care of. And the other 3%, they're either being solved and they're working on them, or
open it up
they're
now,
being
Anthony.
designed.
We're more than a minute in. Scott?
But I invite everyone to go to
One of the
Indigenous
most-
Services to look up, and there's a chart there that really explains it well. I just want everybody to be to know what the facts are.
One of the most inspiring moments that I've seen of Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP, since he's been the leader, was back in the 2019 election, talking about boiled water advisories. And he was asked a question about how many resources it would take, and he made it clear that we wouldn't have having that conversation if it was an issue of North Bay's drinking water, or of Toronto's drinking water, or Vancouver's drinking water. This is a rich country. We're a strong, developed country. There's no reason, it's absolutely shameful that people are living here without access to clean drinking water. And the Liberals have moved their target back to 2026 now. We want to work with whoever forms the government
Steve, quick,
to
sorry,
deal with that
Scott.
as
I'll
quickly
just
as
add on
possible.
there is that absolutely everybody should have good, clean drinking water, for seniors, for kids and everything. But again, to get the job done, we're probably going to have to partnership and to get the projects completed.
If I could add to that, there's been $4 billion spent on 535 water infrastructure projects, including 99 plants and 436 upgrades. Nipissing First Nation is one of the upgrades. They received 1.1 to prevent any future problems with drinking water.
All right, let's move on to question for Steve Trahan. We finally get to some more environmental questions now. Do you support moving to a zero carbon grid by 2030? And what will your government do to make this happen? And this question comes from Peggy Walsh-Craig of the Nipissing Environmental Watch.
So you're asking about the climate change. So Canada Conservatives will fight climate change and protect the environment, but we won't do it on the backs of the working Canadians by hurting the economy. Canada's Conservative will meet the Paris climate commitment and reduce emissions by 2030, but without the government taking working Canadians and driving jobs and investments out of the country. Canada's Conservatives will work and implement an innovative national personal low carbon account. This will put a price on a carbon for consumers without one penny going to the government. It will also be completely transparent and engage consumers in the process of building a lower carbon future.
All right, let's open it up.
Sure. I mean, the reality is that we can all talk about our targets and we can talk about our plans. The reality is talk is cheap. We need action on this issue. And we have seen failures from successive Conservative and Liberal governments on this. We have never hit any of our emissions target. Thanks to Peggy for the question, by the way. I worked with Peggy on lots of things as well. We still have billions of dollars of public dollars that are going to subsidize the fossil fuel industry. We have a Liberal government who only started talking about a just transition for workers in the months before the election, something the New Democrats have been talking about for many, many years. If you're in Nipissing-Timiskaming and you are serious about bold climate action, then the NDP is the vote for you. It's the only vote for you.
Okay, I got to give Anthony some time here now.
Well, I mean, we've made a commitment, and when we look at the scientists who looked at our plan, and the former leader of the Green Party in BC, he said our plan is the best one. It's the one he dreamed of, is what he said. He gave us an A+, not the NDP, definitely not the Conservatives. So what we're looking at the plans, and the whole thing is to make sure that we have a whole scale of things, everything from new technology, making sure that the new technology is developed here in Canada and then becomes part of the industry. What happened is by becoming part of the industry, it's part of the economy. We grow it from there. Giving incentives to buy vehicles that are electric or upgrade your home. There has to be a cost on pollution.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there because, again, we have a lot of questions to get to. 10 seconds, go.
Sure. With respect to the plan, the proof is in the pudding. The Liberals are really, really good at the headlines, but they're not so good when it comes to the trend lines. We're the only G7 country whose greenhouse gas emissions are continuing to rise. It's 2021. Our greenhouse gas emissions are continuing to rise. Can you put faith in the Liberal plan?
That's way more than 10 seconds, so we're going to move on to the next question. You get to answer it first. What is your party's stance on the carbon tax? Do you think the added tax on fuel has actually helped carbon emissions? And I'm sensing maybe not.
Well, I think carbon pricing is an important tool to dealing with climate action. So, we support carbon pricing. The problem with the Liberal plan is that they've exempted the big polluters from the carbon price. I'm not sure how much that really helps, right? Carbon pricing is one strategy, but it's kind of odd to put a price on carbon and then turn around and give billions of dollars in subsidies to the fossil fuel industry and spend $5 billion of public money buying a pipeline. Right? The NDP is clear, has been unequivocal, doesn't mince words. We will ban fossil fuel subsidies, reinvest those billions of public dollars into a just transition for workers, invest in...
Aren't they a very powerful lobby, though?
They are a powerful lobby, but luckily I represent the NDP, and those are not our people. We do not answer to the fossil fuel industry like the other parties. We answer to the workers, we answer to the people.
Stephen.
Well, it's one of those tread lightly ones there. Questions is, you got to watch what we can do. With the Conservatives, you can't go too harsh. We got to get our jobs back together. We have to get our economy rolling, and part of it is oil and gas. And we have to get those people working again, and those are good paying jobs. And from there, we can look at once things are rolling. Then we can sit there and go, you know what? We can look and provide assistance with regards of greener choices for them and everything. And just take a look, for an example, Sudbury, Big Nickel, the big stack's coming down. So years of that stack being throwing pollution all over our area. Well, they made innovative. They put innovative. They've made some decent choices, and they're moving forward.
Okay, Anthony, you're last before we go to a break.
Yeah, we've committed to removing all subsidies to heavy emitters by 2023, and that's well on its way. And is there a price on pollution, price on carbon? Definitely. Because when you look at it, if there's a cost involved, when you're polluting and you're pumping out those gases, you'll want to decrease them. So what it does is it provides an incentive for business to make more money by decreasing their carbon output.
But tell me if I'm wrong, didn't the NDP candidate say that you were a little closer, your party was a little closer aligned to the big companies, the big gas and oil companies?
But the NDP is more aligned?
No, that you said the other parties were.
Well, I think the proof's in the pudding, right? The NDP would not continue to subsidize fossil fuel industries with billions of dollars of public money.
That's what I want to get Anthony to respond to. Do you agree or disagree?
Or
with what he
exempt
said?
the biggest
I
polluter.
agree.
Anthony's up.
If you do something suddenly, it causes a real earthquake. What it is, we've got accelerated to 2023, where it's a reasonable withdrawal, and a lot of them are expenses that they are putting through to have a business going. So, I mean, I'm not sure where a lot of these subsidies are going or what he's referring to, but a lot of them are expenses. And that is something that is just a part of doing business. What we want to do is make sure that there's absolutely none left by the time 2023 comes
All right,
along,
gentlemen.
We
so
don't
that
have
they
time
can
for that.
continue to hire
We're going
people
to stop for a moment.
and change.
Catch your breath, have a little bit of water. We'll be back with more of the 2021 candidates debate for the federal election next Monday. More coming at you here on your TV right after this. Hi, everybody. We're back for the continuation of the all candidates debate here at the Capitol Center on your TV. Next question, we'll go first to Scott this time. Where's your party stand on private health care? Let me be clear. Private health care. Is there a place in Canada for private health care to help supplement the high cost of public health care in this country?
Right, well, that's the easiest question we've had all night. The NDP is firm about the fact that healthcare services should be public. There shouldn't be no two tiers. There should be no unequal access to healthcare. When you have a private system, it draws a profit motive and draws resources out of the system, and it makes an unequal access and various qualities of care that you're able to get depending on how much you can afford. Public healthcare system is the foundation of our universal healthcare. That is something the NDP has believed in from the beginning all the way back to Tommy Douglas. You can thank us for universal healthcare, and I'll even go further than that. We want to make more things public. We want to take profit out of long-term care. We want to make sure that Medicare is expanded to include eventually dental care, vision care, mental health care. There should be a head-to-toe coverage for Canadians.
Wouldn't the tax be enormous, though, to fund all of that?
Well, we're already making our moves on pharmacare. We already have that costed. We've already costed mental health coverage for people who don't already have workplace coverage. We've costed dental coverage for people who don't have workplace coverage.
Okay,
and
we're
we
gonna open it
still
up
are
now.
showing the lowest deficits of all three parties.
Hey, Anthony, you're going to go next to respond.
But there's nothing to respond to. I mean, public health care has to be public health care. As soon as you privatize it, it ends up causing a problem. Any country that you look at where they have a blended system.
But there are private aspects to so-called public health. More things have been privatized, haven't they, in the last 10 or 15 years?
It
We could
depends
thank
on what.
conservative governments for that.
Yeah, okay, we'll thank the Conservative.
All right, well, I'm
Departments.
going to go to the
I
Conservative
agree.
candidate.
No,
Do you
I
agree
mean,
with that?
Well, I'll
it's
say
a
the
public,
Canada's
it's a
Conservatives
public
will meet
system,
with the
so
premiers
that we don't
within
have a two-tier
the first
system.
100 days of the forming the government and propose a new health agreement with the provinces and the territories that boost an annual growth rate of the Canada Health transfers at least 6%. This will inject nearly $6 billion into the healthcare system over the next 10 years.
All right, I'm going to move on to the next question. This one goes to Stephen. This question, pharmacare. How would your party build on the strengths of the existing system without reducing or replacing the coverage already enjoyed by most Canadians? Sort of a related topic, but your thoughts first.
Well, again, you have to work with we'll have to work with the provinces with regards to Canada Health, and we'll, ultimately what we want to do is provide shorter wait times to see a doctor, also shorter wait times for surgeries.
How do you do that?
So, well, it's, you know what, we're going to have to, like I said, we're going to work with the provinces, and we're going to have to throw some injections of money into the provinces.
You're going to open it up now, so anybody else, Anthony, you can jump in now if you'd like.
Sure, I mean, we're very committed to pharmacare. It's not something that happens overnight because it is provincial jurisdiction. Like the Childcare that we've got seven provinces, one territory involved, we've got one agreement so far with PEI, and we're doing it one province at a time. Hopefully by the time we're done, we'll have some commonality across so that we can have a national framework, which we are working on, and it takes time. You can't just announce it when it's not your jurisdiction.
But
what has to happen
is
is
fair, Anthony, to say that when transfer payments go from federal governments to provincial governments, even though you say the jurisdiction isn't the same, they rely on federal money. Is that a fair statement?
Very much so. But you have to have an agreement in place before you impose it on someone. I mean, it's not a dictatorship here in Canada. We have to negotiate when it's not our jurisdiction and make sure that they do come into play. And what we're doing is the same thing as the Childcare, is we're doing it one province at a time.
Scott.
The Liberal Party wants us to believe that because they haven't been able to deliver on their promise for pharmacare over the last 6 years, including, as you pointed out, 4 years of a majority government, that somehow it's impossible. It's okay if it doesn't happen overnight, Anthony, but sometime in the last 6 years would have been nice, or in the decade since the Liberal Party has been promising pharmacare. This is not normal. It is not impossible. It's something that exists in every single rich country that has a universal healthcare system, with the exception of Canada. I talked to Dan in Timiskaming, whose kid, there's a 2-income family, they're barely able to afford their housing, and they have a sick kid who has to go down south every 3 months, and his medication is not covered, and they're at the brink of not being able to afford that. That is not normal, it's not right, it doesn't make any of us healthier, it doesn't make our communities more resilient or more stable. Something that needs immediate action, and the Liberal Party has failed to deliver that.
Mr. Rhoda, next question is for you. Canada is a trading nation, as most are, but Canada does a lot of trading, obviously. Yet our own domestic market has barriers with inter-provincial trade. What are your party's views on opening up inter-provincial trade so Canadians can do business with one another here at home?
We've been working with the provinces to open it up as much as possible. And you're right, Canada does have free trade with a number of countries, whether it's CETA in Europe, whether it's with the United States and Mexico, or the Pacific Rim. It really works well. Unfortunately, again, when you have, and if you've got to study our history and find out how we got provinces to join Canada, because they kept certain jurisdictions. You can't just walk all over them. So what we're trying to do is open it up so that we can get materials going across east and west, not just north and south. We have more trade going north and south than we do east and west. We want to make sure that those borders on the provinces are open to trade and take off the limits. So we continue to work with the provinces to make sure that that's open.
Well, it only makes sense to trade within your provinces. It strengthens your jobs and agreements. It just gets everybody working again. You're sharing your resources from province to province. It only makes sense.
Scott.
Sure. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm not aware of that specifically in the NDP platform. I don't want to make up an answer, but Anthony keeps talking about, and rightfully so, about jurisdiction and importance of respecting the provincial jurisdiction, which I think he's right on. But on any issue of national importance, we need the federal government's leadership on it. And, yep, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm going to go to question
Can
for Steve. 10 seconds, 15 seconds, Anthony, that's it.
Actually, I encourage everyone to look at our platform where we're looking at building or making this national grid so we can export hydro from clean producing dams to the rest of the countries right across borders. Right now we're exporting north-south, not east-west. We're working on that.
Let's go to Stephen. Relations with China have always been a red flag issue in regards to our relationships with that country. There's always been some very contentious issues. In your opinion, has the Liberal Party done enough to try to bring home Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig from China? What would your party do differently?
Well, I'm not 100% sure on that. I know that we'd have to sit there and try and negotiate with the Chinese people, and I know it's very difficult to try and negotiate with those with that country, and we'd have to, look at different avenues, and we have to try and get those our Canadians back home. Again, it's one of those things where we're going to have to keep pushing, and we have to get those two Canadians back home.
This is an issue that I'm reluctant to turn into a partisan issue. I think I have a tremendous amount of empathy for the family of the Michaels. I can't imagine how difficult of an experience that has been for the families and for them themselves. I think we need a tripartisan, or all the parties in the House of Commons need to come together to work with our allies to do whatever can be done to bring the Michaels home. That being said, the NDP is really strong on standing with the pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong. We stood for declaring a genocide against the Uyghurs, something that we didn't get support from the government. But we have to take a strong stand on human rights abuses in China.
Anthony.
No, working with our allies, we have to put pressure on China. To take Canada against China, China is huge. And they do have a lot of power and a lot of money and a lot of military. We can't go in and invade and take the Michaels out. Unfortunately, we have to negotiate. We have to use diplomatic methods. One of the things that we found works very well is bringing allied countries together, and actually the Chinese term is losing face. We want to embarrass them into giving in on human rights, on giving in to letting go the Michaels. These are things that we have to do a little bit at a time and diplomatically. I wish we could just go in there and grab them and run with them and take them home. Unfortunately, that's not a realistic way of doing things. And I don't think anybody up here is saying that. We all recognize that with China, we have to tread very lightly.
Next question will go to Scott. Many have criticized Mr. Trudeau on the timing of the election. The pandemic is not over. Do you feel he was just in his reasoning for calling the election?
Oh, absolutely not. I think Canadians expect minority governments to work together until either the opposition parties defeat the government, or until the government has run out of room to work with the other parties of areas of agreement. Neither of those two things happen. We know that this election was called for one reason and one reason alone, and that was because the leader of the Liberal Party saw an opportunity to increase their power. It's cynical. In the first week of this election, that was literally the only thing people wanted to talk about at the doors. Nobody wanted us to be in election. I myself would rather be doing my city council work than being here. I think it's not the kind of leadership that we expect from our government. We expect our government to put the interest of Canadians first rather than their own cynical political interests, and we didn't see that from the leader of the Liberal Party.
All right, let's open it up. Go ahead.
Well, I'll agree with Scott here on this point here too. It's, we didn't need this election. We didn't need the extra cost of over $600 million to the taxpayers. We're already in debt. We know that. It was one person agreed on this here, and it was all about Justin to call the election. And again, I would agree with
Go ahead,
Scott.
Mr. Rhoda.
Let's take a look at historically what happens with minority governments. They last about 12 to 24 months, usually around the 18-month mark, and that's what happened to this one. Why? Because the first 6 months, everybody tries to work together, and I'll be honest with you, with COVID, I was very proud of parliamentarians on all parties and all sides. They were working well together, and everything was coming together well. I thought, this might work out for a few years. Now, what happens on the second 6 months, we fell into what normally happens. The government cannot get their bills through, and there's stuff being jammed, so they're slowing down. And there's frustration on both sides, and tempers go through the roof. On that third 6-month period, the last 6 months of most minority governments, The opposition is blocking government bills. The government is retaliating by stopping their private members' bills and their bills. They're blaming each other, and it gets very emotional and very tense in the House. So what happens is they throw their arms up in the air and they say, look, we have to take care of this now,
I
so
gotta
that
give
they
Scott a
have a
chance
clear
here.
mandate to really
Go
take
ahead,
care
Scott.
of
There were
COVID-19.
plenty of pieces of legislation that were in the process of being worked on that the Liberals had the support of the NDP. When it came to banning conversion therapy, which is an extremely harmful practice against LGBTQ people, we were working with them on that. That legislation is in jeopardy now. The Childcare is in jeopardy now. They could have worked with us on pharmacare, which they say they believe in. They could have worked with us on bold climate action, which they say they believe in. We were talking about mandatory minimum sentences, which are extremely harmful to marginalized communities. There was plenty of room for legislation for us to work together. Not to mention the fact that on the day the Prime Minister called the election is the day that our embassy in Afghanistan closed down, where we could have been focused on that issue in the weeks and months, rather than having the Prime Minister traveling across the country with his cabinet ministers making funding announcements.
Stephen, do you want
They
to
could have
jump
been
in
working
on
on
this?
Afghanistan.
That's fine, thanks.
Mr. Singh talks pretty words, but in the background, he's not cooperating the way he's saying. The things, yeah, he talks a good talk, but everything is slow and takes forever to get through. So what happens is nothing actually happens. It takes forever, and stuff gets like you take C6.
Okay, we're going to move on to another question.
We had legislation that was in the process of being passed, legislation that we had supported them on.
This one goes first to Stephen. You brought up Afghanistan, Scott. The situation in Afghanistan is deteriorating as the Taliban is taking control of the country very quickly after the American pullout. Many Canadian soldiers lost their lives fighting for peace in the Middle East in that country over the last, near 2 decades. What role does Canada have in Afghanistan? You're first.
What role does Canada has in Afghanistan right now?
Well, going forward, I guess, and maybe what happened in the last 20 years.
I'm going to say that our commitment is to ensure that we provide aid to the Afghan people and does not end up in the hands of the Taliban regime. Will not recognize the Taliban as a legitimate government. Their use of force is completely unacceptable to their people. So it's devastating what's going on in there right now, and it's just not right.
I want to move on or stay in that topic. Military veterans obviously are pretty devastated from some that I interviewed about this pullout.
Sure. I mean, I served in the Canadian Forces as well, in the Infantry Reserves, the Governor General's Foot Guard in Ottawa while I was doing my undergrad, and I served with people who went overseas to Afghanistan. It's really shocking and shameful of us to have had so many people who were left behind. And again, here I'm reluctant to make this a partisan issue because it's so important. I'm hesitant because of the international nature of this to sit and criticize my own government on this. But we knew for months prior to the fall of Kabul that the Taliban was coming. I heard on CBC radio in the weeks and weeks and weeks ahead of this that we needed to get our people out, the people who supported our troops, that kept our people safe there in Afghanistan. And we had so many more opportunities to evacuate people that are now facing fate even worse than death, in many cases death itself. And I really think more could have been done prior to that.
Anthony, I got to get you to weigh in on this as well. The American pullout was a shock about how quickly things deteriorated.
It went a lot faster than it was supposed to, and that caught everyone off guard right around the world. I've been to Afghanistan twice during the military action, and what I saw there, it was not pretty, but the soldiers who were there, the men and women who were fighting on our behalf and keeping peace, allowed young girls to go to school, allowed people to get an education. That's something that we can all be very proud of. Am I pleased with what's happening? No, but it is happening, and we have to work with it.
The feeling is by many veterans is, was it worth it?
It was worth it. We've made a difference in their lives. If even now when you see women, they're still going to university, going to school. Is it the way we'd like it? No. But it is much better. They
Anybody
made
else
a
want to weigh in
difference in
quickly before I
people's
move on
lives.
to the next topic?
What we have to do is we're still trying to influence what's going on in Afghanistan by working with our allies, bringing out the refugees. We've got 3,700 people out who are immediate allies. The 20,000 refugees we want to get out if they can get to the countries around them who are working with us. Now,
Anthony, no, we're going to stop for
Afghanistan relies on 80%
purposes.
of
We're
its
moving on.
GDP
Anthony, I'm
from
not going
foreign
to shout
care.
over you. We're moving on to the next question, and Scott gets to take this first. Since the last Canadian federal election, the U.S. has elected a new president in Joe Biden, What impact does this have on Canada-U.S. relations, and how will you and your party plan to work together with Americans to help both countries?
Sure, I mean, it's a really important ally. Maybe we often talk about them as the most important ally, although I would quibble with that a little bit and say that our indigenous nations are probably our closest allies, or certainly our closest allies over the last few hundred years. That being said, America is a really important ally. We need to work with them. We need to have open communications with them. We've got a president in Joe Biden who agrees with us, agrees with the NDP on a lot of issues, bold climate action. They're setting really bold climate targets, which I think we can help them with, and we can all help with our international duties to climate change. And this is also a president who believes in taxing the rich, just like we do, and investing in social infrastructure. And so we have that in common with them, and we can bond over that. And we
Steve,
can
go
both
ahead.
help each other out.
Absolutely. It's, we have to work with our neighbors, and we have to get back to our free trade, and the Conservatives realize that, and we're going to, if we can get our free trade going, that's also going to help our economic, to getting people back to work and getting some of our resources moving around throughout the North America.
Anthony, they could come here. We can't cross their border yet unless it's specific circumstances. How much of a concern is that to you?
Well, it's a concern because they are making decisions that block us out. I'll be honest with you. It's not something I'm pleased with, but we're basing our decision on science. But as far as trade goes with the United States and President Biden, things are much better now. I've been down to Washington on a regular basis when Trump was there. I haven't been there since Biden's there because of what's going on, but we continue to open the doors and continue trade going on. We have a lot of trade going back and forth, billions of dollars a year that have to continue. With a friendly president down there, it makes it that much easier. I've got scheduled talks with Nancy Pelosi. Hopefully I win the election, and I'll be going on to those talks. I've gotten to know her. We're good friends, and we are having bilateral talks. We've had talks with the European Union. We want to make sure that those talks and the trading continues, and we want to make sure that it continues to happen.
If I'm elected, I'm happy to honor that meeting, by the way, and go visit Nancy Pelosi on behalf of the people of Nipissing-Timiskaming.
Sure, why not? Let's all go to California. I want to ask a question about the NAFTA deal that was negotiated, well, the NAFTA 2. Should it be renegotiated? I'm going to go to Steve first.
I'm not 100% sure. I didn't read up on the NAFTA deal a heck of a lot, so I'll refrain from.
Okay,
from answering that
Anthony.
question.
You know what? It's not
hard
bad.
to renegotiate it, right?
No, exactly. It's not that bad. I mean, I think it was more President Trump who wanted to give the appearance that he had gotten some wins. He did get a little bit of marginal things, but overall, it remains the same deal. So leave it the way it is, and let's work with our neighbors so that we continue to trading.
All right, Scott.
All of our trade deals.
20 seconds, sir.
Sure. All of our trade deals need to be written in such a way that supports Canadian workers, that supports Canadian industries, and that supports our goals towards reaching our climate targets, which we haven't hit any in the history of climate targets in this country.
Final question, we'll go to Mr. Rota first. How are you, as an elected official, if you're reelected, going to work together to make our community rebound the way that it needs to and has to, cut the political barriers to ensure our communities have the ability to bounce back? Anthony goes first.
One of my biggest strengths is working with people, working with the mayors of East Ferris, of Callander, of Timiskaming Shores, North Bay. What happens is by working with municipal leaders and provincial leaders, if we bring them together, we find solutions. So what we're doing is making sure that we understand what is required and how we can cater to the different regions in the riding to make sure that any funding or any program really is reflective of what is found in the riding. And that's something that I spend a lot of time with, especially when it's something that is being put together. I want to make sure that it has Nipissing-Timiskaming's thumbprint on it so that it suits our needs.
Okay, there's no arguments over this one. We'll just give everybody a chance to say what they think too.
Sure, I mean, the local communities in this district have been utterly clear about what the priorities are, about what the main concerns are in our communities. Not just North Bay, it's the same things that we hear with the exception of broadband and cell phone, as I mentioned. It's the same thing we hear all across the district. The NDP has listened to those concerns. The NDP's priorities are the same priorities as the ones in our district, and that's affordable housing, bold climate action, people being able to afford their prescription medication, childcare, truth and reconciliation, addressing the opioid crisis. These are the concerns of our district, and they're the priorities of the NDP.
Stephen.
Oh, absolutely. We need to market our district, and we have to, get our economy going. I just want to touch base on one thing here too, is natural gas. So everybody put in an application through for Enbridge for natural gas, and East Ferris put one in. I spoke with the other small communities up north that put their application in. Everybody hit the check marks off the boxes and everything, stuff like that. That would have been a huge project in our area. And,
All right,
and there was supposed to be lots of projects, and not one project got allotted for our district here. So it's, again, we got to market our businesses and what we need, and we need to push forward on that.
All right, we are down to closing statements. We're going to begin with Stephen Trahan, who is running for the Conservative Party of Canada.
Thanks a lot,
Stephen, you
Greg.
have 2 minutes.
Thanks, Greg. So once again, we'd like to thank your TV as well as yourself, Greg, for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. Right from the start of this campaign, we've shown exactly a vote for Conservatives will get you. Canada's recovery plan will get you our economy firing up on all cylinders by creating jobs and getting people back to work in our district and as well as in our sector. Canada's recovery plan, the Conservative government will secure jobs, secure accountability, secure the mental health, secure the country, for example, getting medical supplies here in Canada, secure our economy by balancing the budget over the next decade. I have a proven path as a public service. I'm dedicated to serve and committed to our district. I will secure the future for all the Nipissing-Timiskaming people for a better lifestyle. I ask you to vote for Stephen Trahan, and I'll represent you in Ottawa.
All right, that sends us off to a Liberal candidate, Anthony Rota. Anthony, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Greg. Merci. Thank you for taking the
Time to listen to us this evening. As I mentioned earlier, areas that I want to concentrate are on job creation, housing, Indigenous services, $10 a day childcare, protecting the environment, pharmacare, services for seniors, and there's so much more. Ce sont des enjeux qui vont améliorer nos vies et avancer notre société. Et pour faire sûr que ces bénéfices sont implémentés par le gouvernement, et je veux aussi faire sûr qu'à Nipissing-Timiskaming, tout ce que nous nécessitons est dédié et là par un député qui est capable et dédié. Je suis cette personne. I believe that my experience and ability to identify opportunities will greatly benefit the riding. I've always believed that the best way to good government is by sending the best person available to Parliament. You've heard from all of us this evening. My strengths are experience, trustworthiness, and ability to deliver for constituents. My track record in Ottawa includes being trusted by colleagues to be the Northern Ontario Liberal Caucus Chair, the National Caucus Chair, and then ultimately Speaker of the House of Commons. My reputation is one of bringing people together and getting results. On September 20th, I respectfully ask for your vote, and I ask you to vote for Anthony Rota, and let me continue to work for you in Ottawa. Thank you. Merci. Miigwech.
And from the NDP, Scott Robertson. Scott.
Okay, thanks, Greg. I want to say to the people of Nipissing-Timiskaming that the result of this election is not a foregone conclusion. It's not predetermined. The voters have the power to choose whoever they want in this election. And stranger things have happened in elections all the time. We decide who we send to Ottawa. Si vous avez pris le temps d'écouter le débat au complet, vous savez très bien que nous avons des candidats qui sont très différents, qui représentent des partis qui sont très différents. The message that we send by electing one of the people here, or Greg Galanty of the PPC, is a very, very different message to the government of Ottawa. I know from talking to you at your doors that you think we should be doing better. If you elect me to be your representative, the message that you're sending is a message of hope. The message that you're sending is that you want a fighter who isn't going to let go when it comes to the issues of affordable housing, bold climate action, pharmacare, childcare, and all the issues that I've been talking about tonight and that I've been championing as the city councilor for 2 or 3 years. If you elect me, you're sending a message that the rich and the biggest, most profitable corporations should be the ones to pay for the pandemic. By contrast, if we elect the Conservative, what we're saying is that we're okay with privatization of our services, service cuts, and higher deficits. If we elect the Liberal, we're giving a pat on the back to the Liberal government, who have failed us on climate action, who have failed us on truth and reconciliation, who have failed us on housing, who have failed us on pharmacare and electoral reform and a whole lot of other issues. If we elect a Liberal, we're saying that having the Speaker is more important than having a fighter who's in the trenches, making noise and agitating and doing everything they can to push forward solutions to these issues. I know that many people watching here tonight have probably never voted NDP before. I'm asking for you to consider a vote to the NDP. I'm asking for you to send me to Ottawa so that I can show you what happens when we send a passionate advocate for the issues that matter most to the people of this district, and I won't let you down.
All right, guess what? We have a few bonus seconds here. I want to ask all three of you quickly in 30 seconds to tell me why your leader is the right one to lead this country. You get to go first, Anthony Rota. 30 seconds.
Well, we have three leaders. We have Aaron O'Toole, we have Jagmeet Singh, and we have Justin Trudeau. Three leaders who are very different, who have very different outlooks on things. Are any of them perfect? No. Which one is the best one? I've worked with all three, and I believe that Justin Trudeau is the one who has the strength. He has the vision. He has the ability to take the best ideas from both sides and then go forward. It's not about, well, left ideology or right ideology. It's about making sure that the thing is practical. Whatever you're putting forward, the bill, the program, that it's good for Canadians. And that's how we get ahead. And we have to work with Canadians.
Okay, Anthony, the bonus time is now done. Bonus round now for Steve.
Yes, so Aaron O'Toole is the right leader to lead this country. He's going to get us out of the economic woes. He's the one that's going to get our country up and running again. And vote for Steve Trahan is a vote for Aaron O'Toole.
All right. Scott?
I stand behind Jagmeet Singh 100%. I think Jagmeet Singh's life story is one that we can tell. He understands what we're going through. He is somebody who's faced a lot of challenges in his life, and he has done an amazing job to be a fighter for regular Canadians. He's never, ever wavered from that. He's unequivocal in his support for regular Canadians, and I know he understands what you're going through, and I know he's listening, and I look forward to amplifying his voice and the voice of the other NDP MPs.
All right, gentlemen, thank you for your infinite patience and not taking your mics off till the very, very end of the broadcast. Please join us next Monday night, live on your TV, 9:30 for election 2021 coverage. Thank you, gentlemen. It's been a long and interesting night, and that's it for here from the Capitol Center. Thank you for watching. I'm Greg Esterbrooks. Thanks to the crew, and good night.